Uncle Dan.
Hello.
You know, in spite of the fact that we all saw each other in person the other day.
Hello. Oh, sorry. Yes. Oh, yeah, we did. We saw each other in person.
Yeah,
it was
we did.
We had
amazing.
an IRL. Luckily, Doug's backyard is big enough for us all to be in opposite corners.
Yeah,
we
sat
literally haven't done that since
the whole
March.
time. Yeah. We sat a good 10, 12 feet away from each other and reveled in Trump's diagnosis. But,
Yes.
you know,
yes.
it just reminds me that during quarantine, there are many things I should have done and didn't do. Some cardio would have been a good idea. Trying to get some kind of handle on my alcoholism could have been a good idea. But I also didn't read as much as I wish I had. So I think, you know, in lieu of reading, I'd sure like someone just to summarize some books for me so I can act like I did.
let's call this our quarantine book club.
Yeah,
and
there is a service I've heard advertised where you can listen to just kind of the summary of a book.
that's our next podcast.
Audio book summaries, which is kind of hilarious.
It's non-readers digest.
Yeah, Cliff Notes via the radio. So I got a book review for you guys.
Woohoo!
A couple of books, actually, but let me start here. You guys know how it's an open joke that New York Times op-ed writer Tom Friedman, world traveler and bon vivant, mighty champion of both-siderism, has the uncanny ability to find himself in the backseat of a cab anywhere in the world, only to have unsolicited the driver of the cab offer an opinion about whatever Mr. Friedman has in mind at that very moment. Mm-hmm. Like a cabbie in Cairo offering his thoughts on the American voters' consensus on the capital gains tax, or an Indian tuk-tuk driver's musings about the North American Free Trade Agreement, or a Filipino cabbie wondering when the Democrats are going to get their duffs and get off their duffs and come to the table for a bipartisan agreement on a malingering omnibus spending package. Yeah, total bullshit, right?
I think he even had one of his caddies at a golf course be the source for one of his columns.
Yeah, for some Byzantine American, inside political baseball thing. So it's complete bullshit.
We were raised on that shit. We were look. Mormon General Conference is happening right now.
Well, here comes that. Does Dan introduce? So for our Mormon friends,
I don't mean to jump your gun there. Sorry,
but you're confirming my bias here. So you're being my cabbie right now. So how about high-ranking 70s or apostles in the Mormon Church speaking at conference, indeed going on at this very moment, always having just the right anecdote of a miraculous change of heart in a troubled doubter, or, fuck it, a literal miracle that fits almost too neatly into the very specific moral they're selling at the moment. Yet, those godly folk who are the subject of these faith-affirming stories are never specifically named.
No.
Funny that, but these holy men with such sacred callings would never lie about a thing like that, would they?
It's always just... a sister in blah 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 once told me about, and never never named.
There's never a name. So these are two excellent examples of agendas in search of a supporting narrative. Uh-huh. In both cases, these are obvious lies told to support a preconceived position. And I should give a loving shout out here to our superfan and patron Ivana Ivy for the lead into this insidious quagmire we're about to jump into. Back in episode 23, we did a big examination of the satanic panic of the 1980s and 1990s that never really went away and now has found a home among many of our relatives and their laughably pig-stupid new cult, QAnon, which we covered in episode 102, but it's completely shifted what it was even since then. In that episode, we discussed just such an example of an agenda-forward blizzard of lies, the book that is largely credited with, if not starting, at least turbocharging the satanic panic, and that book was called Michelle Remembers.
Right.
This salacious and preposterously fictional screed is claimed to be the result of psychiatrist Lawrence Pasder guiding his patient and later wife, Michelle Smith, through a program of recovered memories which included a satanic dentist, which dentist isn't, exactly. Pulling out most of her teeth, then drilling holes in the rest, having horns and a tail sewn onto her body, and being dragged around by Satan's tail during an 81-day Black Mass in sleepy Victoria, Canada, where the actual Virgin Mary showed up to tell her she was going to be okay. You know, all real things that happen. This fraudulent piece of garbage became a guide for police departments nationwide on how to target weird teenagers and daycare workers and charged him with the ritual murders of children who weren't even missing. And the authors were even invited on the Oprah Winfrey Show.
Yeah.
Though, as was established in episode 22, Oprah is pretty down to signal boost any absurd sort of bullshit that comes across her plate.
100%.
Because Utah Mormonism never failed to surprise, disappoint, and horrify, it turns out some Utah Mormon shenanigans may have influenced the authors of Michelle Remembers. How about that, guys?
What? Oh,
So
we are so
proud to be a
powerful.
Utah.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's dive in. In 1971, a 200-page, quote, diary, conveniently authored by Anonymous, hit the shelves. It's purported to be the diary of a good white Christian girl who, after having LSD slipped into her cola pop at a party, falls into a life of addiction, sexual slavery, and most shockingly, occasional foul language.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The, quote, diary, Go Ask Alice, was an overnight success. It has been translated into 16 languages, has been reprinted 43 times, and
Jesus.
And it is in almost 51 years. It has never been out of print. It
What?
was never. It was, quote, edited by a sweet little Mormon church lady by the name of Beatrice Sparks. Born in Idaho in 1917, Mrs. Sparks raised a crop of Mormon boys and got her Ph.D. * from BYU after moving to Provo, Utah. She became interested in the issues teens face, mostly how to scare them into never leaving the Mormon church, and became a teen counselor of some kind in 1955, although that's a bit vague. Sometime around 1970, it occurred to Sister Sparks that she had a diary of one of her clients tucked away in a file. And my goodness, wouldn't it be helpful to the youth of today to read about the slippery slope from a glass of cola pop to fucking bikers in a graveyard for a dose? So, deeply concerned to preserve the anonymity of the deceased young girl in the story, Beatrice got to work. But funny thing, despite the book's massive success and influence, no one ever came forward to corroborate the story. No parent, friend, or relative, nobody. Sister Sparks claimed the diary, which she said was a loose collection of notebook pages and random scraps of paper you'd find at a wild drug party, is forever locked in her publisher's vault. Sure wouldn't want poor Anonymous's cover blown 50 years after her death, right, guys?
Right.
And it gets a little shakier still. While loads of teens read the salacious details, and still do, of this young adult fiction version of Requiem for a Dream, with trembling fingers and halting breath, having returned to it as adults, many of those same readers find it suspicious. Teens tend to write in a pretty basic, if emotionally gushy sort of shorthand in their diaries. That would even be more true of a teen who, despite being strung out for weeks on a combination of speed, acid, booze, and weed, laying on the floor of a flophouse, yet still able to engage in the ladylike discipline of keeping a diary. Comedic writer Daniel Mallory Ortberg plucked some of the choicest bits of hilarious, quote, teen language, so I'm pulling from his writing here to share with you guys. The diary opens with the excited teen gushing, "Wonderful news, diary. We're moving. Daddy has been invited to become the Dean of Political Science at blank. Isn't that exciting? Maybe it will be like when I was younger. Maybe again he'll teach in Europe every summer and we'll go with him, like we used to. Oh, those were fun, fun times. I'm going to start a diet this very day. I will be a positively different person by the time we get to our new home. Not one more bite of chocolate nor nary a French fried potato will pass my lips till I've lost 10 globby pounds of lumpy lard."
Oh, my God.
Okay, I will give anyone listening a shiny new gold doubloon if they can find a single American teenager born after the Civil War who has ever once said the phrase, "Nary a French fried potato will pass my lips."
No, the only you can only say French fried potato with an English accent or like Sling Blade.
Yeah, you got two options.
Got a little French fried potato
diet today.
So, and then another time she dramatically laments, "Dear precious diary,
oh Martha,
I am baptizing you with my tears. I know we have to leave and that one day I will even have to leave my father and mother's home and go into a home of my own. But But ever will I take you with me. This is a 15-year-old girl in the late 1960s, and I'm pretty sure I can prove the last person who ever said, "Ever shall I take you with me," came over on the Mayflower.
This is Anne of Fake Gables.
Oh, it's so... But wait, here comes the turn. That same young diarist, all flush with horsey love, giggling over her diary on her princess bed in her flowered pajamas, in a few short pages becomes this person. And I mean in a few short pages. But just before I was too out of it to notice what was going on, I saw Sheila and that cocksucker she goes with lighten up and setting out speed. I remember wondering why they were getting high when they had just set us out on this wonderful low. And it wasn't until later I realized the dirty sons of bitches had taken turns raping us and treating us sadistically and brutally. And that had been their planned strategy all along, those low-class shit-eaters.
Oh my God.
And,
wow.
Yeah, and this. I don't know who or when or where or who it is. I only know that I am now a priestess of Satan, trying to maintain after a freak out to test how free everybody was and to take our vows.
Wow.
And then this, which I just love. Like this is real. Another day, another blowjob. The fuzz is clamped down till this town is mother dry. Okay. And then
the fuzz.
The fuzz.
Only a 90-year-old.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
I know. This is the...
What year was this published?
1970 or 70.
It almost sounds like
good
Edward
Lord.
G. Robinson wrote that, you know?
Yeah, it's Dragnet, right?
Yeah.
And then shortly
God.
after that day's obligatory blowjob, the book ends jarringly, followed by this postscript. The subject of this book died 3 weeks after her decision not to keep another diary. The parents came home from a movie and found her dead. They
See?
called the police and the hospital, but there was nothing anyone could do. Was it an accidental overdose? A premeditated overdose? No one knows. And in some ways, that question isn't important. What must be of concern is that she died, and that she was only one of thousands of drug deaths that year. So, maybe if Mommy and Daddy had called an ambulance rather than the hospital, where the ambulance goes to, she may have lived. So, as Dan was alluding, for anyone who may or may not have any drug knowledge out there, the quote writer or quote editor of this alleged journal definitely had none.
Right.
Here was the order of drug use in the book. See if you can see any red flags. LSD, speed, benzos, various uppers and downers, injected speed, much, much more acid, tranquilizers, and lastly, marijuana.
Oh, she finally made it to the bad one.
It was the weed she was most terrified of, ended up selling her body for, and if narrative progression is to be believed, died of.
Right.
Oh,
I mean,
my
that-
God.
Sure, diary.
That
Sure.
list of drugs was lifted directly from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, except in reverse order, obviously.
Exactly.
Right.
That's just what he had in his pocket.
Yeah.
So, as Dan was alluding to earlier, so just from the language and obvious ignorance of drugs, their typical progression and effects, the listener can judge for themselves whether this, quote, diary was written by a teenage child of the 1960s, or maybe, just maybe, a very sheltered religious Mormon lady born during the First World War with a serious missionary zeal for her moralizing agenda. Take your time.
Oh my God. Also, you can smell especially when you grew up in it, you can smell when someone's trying to use shock language for Mormons. Like the word blowjob
Would make a Mormon teenager faint in 1971.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But like someone who was actually like sucking dicks to get their next hit,
Yeah.
they wouldn't be. Nobody would say, "Another day, another blowjob."
Punching the clock.
Got a case of the Mondays. Yeah, no,
So in
and
short,
yeah,
Go ahead,
go ahead.
Doug.
No, I'm just I want to get. I'm actually going to look it up and see if there's an audiobook because I want to listen to this because it sounds awesome.
If there isn't, we're doing one. We're doing the unauthorized audiobook. It's for patrons only. You can't tell anybody about it because we'll get in trouble.
yeah,
But
and I will do the kind of Mo the bartender version of her after the drugs, right?
Exactly.
We'll take turns doing different voices for
Mo
her.
Sislak.
Yeah.
Another day, another blowjob. What are you going to do? So in short, this book is a forgery and a work of fiction passing itself off as something more than that. But Snopes and the New York Times, among many others, confidently put a stake through its stupid, disingenuous heart, should you care to look those up. And that's just the beginning of Sister Beatrice Sparks's ethical skid mark on the American teenage landscape, fellas.
What? There's more?
By the way, the name Beatrice Sparks sounds like the most wholesome porn star.
So, flush and feeling all head up over her success with Go Ask Alice, Sister Sparks took on a new and very much more fraught project. Having seen the, quote, positive effect Go Ask Alice was having as a cautionary tale for young readers, a bereaved mother named Marcella Barrett approached Sister Beatrice Sparks. A fellow Mormon from the same Utah County area and therefore far too credulous and trusting of Mark, she had recently lost her beloved 16-year-old son, Alden Barrett, to suicide.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, terrible. In hopes that Sparks could publish something to warn against suicide and the terrible pain that remains in its wake, Mrs. Barrett entrusted Sparks with her dead son's real journal.
No.
Sister Sparks accepted this great trust and honor by betraying that trust stupendously. You see, for deeply religious people, when their agenda is more important than the truth, the agenda supplants the truth and, in fact, becomes the truth in their own minds, even as they consciously set about a time-consuming fraud in the process.
Right.
So after changing Alden's name to Jay and really not a lot of other details to preserve his anonymity, Beatrice Sparks took this journal of a normal teenage kid and his angst about school, girls, the raging Vietnam War, and a suffocating religious culture he was living in, and turned it into, well, something entirely different. Using only 21 of the over 200 real journal entries, Sparks meat-packed a total fiction onto the very real skeleton of this tragically lost young man's story. I'll let the words of the very funny blogger Mondo Molly lay it out. The plot. Nominally, Jay's story is supposed to scare readers off of occult activities, but Sparks casts a wide net, warning teenagers about the dangers of drugs, sexually aggressive high school girls, predatory homosexuals, Ouija boards, ESP, telekinesis, crystal balls, cattle mutilation, transcendental meditation, voodoo, cosmic alertness, astral projection, yoga, and the lost continent of Atlantis.
Oh, my God.
Wait, you just slipped cattle mutilation in there like we weren't going to notice.
Oh, I'll come back to it.
Oh, my God.
And she finishes by saying, I'm sad that chemtrails weren't a thing in 1979 because I could have completed my bingo card.
Right.
So, however tragically Alden Barrett died, and however much trust his grieving mother placed in Beatrice Sparks, Sister Sparks' agenda of the moment was Satanism and the occult. So that is what this horrendous fraud of a book called Jay's Journal is about. A good Mormon boy's descent into black masses and levitating silverware with the kids down to the purple turtle.
Wow.
That's true. It should be abundantly noted, nowhere in Alden Barrett's real diary is there even a whiff of this bullshit.
So the real diary is extant.
Yes, and I'll get to that. It's
out there. Okay.
Yeah, so Beatrice Sparks later had several versions of how she arrived at this completely fabricated libel, saying she interviewed friends of his, found personal letters, etc. She died just 5 years ago and never produced a shred of evidence to corroborate her shifting claims. She had apparently also promised the Barrett family that they could see the manuscript prior to publication, and guess what? That didn't happen.
Shocking.
Yeah. So, when the family finally read the book, saying they were horrified would be an understatement. Apparently it was all too much for the already grieving family, and it just fell apart. Yeah. Mrs. Barrett, being too trusting and of a certain generation of Mormon, made the colossal mistake of not suing the pious Sister Sparks down to her last pair of garments. Alden's younger brother, Scott, has been on a lifelong crusade to clear his brother's name and expose Beatrice Sparks' bad faith assault on his memory. He self-published a refutation of Jay's journal, including the full text of the actual journal, in answer to your question, Dan. He also has a Facebook page called A Place in the Sun, The Truth Behind Jay's Journal, if anyone is interested in checking that out. Over 40 years since the book's publication and nearly 50 years after Alden's tragic death, his grave is still regularly vandalized and defaced.
Man.
I know. In a 2004 interview with the Salt Lake City Weekly, Beatrice Sparks said her lawyers told her not to talk about the book to the press, obviously, but she did express puzzlement with the anger of the Barrett family, helpfully explaining that in the 90s she had written them a personal check for $75.
What?
Yeah.
Then what the hell are they complaining about?
Yeah. Okay. So she was a deeply duplicitous fucking cultist fraudster. So got it. But let's drill into the book a little bit more here. As the quote about the plot summarized, Jay's journal is as preposterous as it is false and morally poisonous. In the story, much like the protagonist in Go Ask Alice, Jay is an innocent duped into a world of peril by insidious forces. This is a really common and conscious trope in young adult cautionary novels that want to scare young teens who would never dream of levitating in a graveyard or giving blowjobs for crank into believing the world outside their parents' or church leaders' watchful eyes is full of sneaky queers and pushermen and slave catchers in groovy vans. And it keeps their characters sympathetic to the hyper-judgmental young Christian readers. But like Alice, the complicated, bright young Jay, once corrupted by the diabolical Tina, a classic evil temptress of the sort last seen hanging out by apple trees in the first chapters of Genesis, Jay finds himself tempest-tossed in an invisible sea of, quote, O, the letter O. This is Jay's word for the occult and for the underground occultists that are every fucking where in this dung heap of a book. His closest friends, his teachers, his school counselors, the teacher at the boarding school he gets sent to after stealing from his dad's pharmacy, the entire world, and this is like Utah County in the 70s, right? Yeah. The entire world is easily 80% secret Satanists.
Right.
If one were to extend the satanic statistics of Jay's journal globally. Of course, Ouija boards make the requisite appearance. If you want to get a taste for how white-knuckle horrified Mormons like Beatrice Sparks are of those, check out episode 58. But in short, they are paralyzed with fear of them. And here are some choice quotes from the book. Just marvel at people thinking anything like this was true. All the blood was dumped into the tub, and one by one we were baptized in it, washing the sins and imperfections of our pre-O life away. Our heads were anointed with a few drops of urine we had milked out of the bull's dinghy as he was laying there. I should note here, they killed a cow in the story. So neither was it a bull nor in possession of a dinghy. And also, we're levitating slaves of Satan covered in blood of an animal we just murdered, but we're far too shy and innocent to say the word penis.
Right.
So Mormon. So here Jay is under both, in the next thing here he is under both the power of Satan and, of course, PCP.
Right.
I could feel the whole group throwing power at me, and a strange burning incense filled my nostrils, my throat, my chest. Detached from my own self, somewhat surprised, I found myself undressing and joining the circle. Angel dust. It should be called devil dust. What a young wit Jay is. I'm really pulling for this kid.
Yeah.
So here's a little spooky Mormon exoticism that Sister Sparks thought the young minds of 1978 might get spooked by. Tina and I sat on the floor with a candle between us. In a very low, muted voice, she told me how in the dark evening hills of Haiti, the drums begin to throb in the warm night air as the Wangan priests conducted sacred secret ceremonies requesting favors from Igbo, Damballa, and other gods.
Oh, wow.
So getting just a tincture of racism in there is always good.
I call that's cultural exchange is what that is.
It's like the multicultural hall. And, of course, Tina can be both a handmaid of Satan and a standard-issue high school mean girl at the same time. I quote, Tina won runner-up in the Miss Apple Hill contest. She said the Ouija board and the crystal ball both had said she would be queen and that only my negativeness made her slip down to princess. Sister Sparks was such a terrible fucking writer, you could almost believe a possessed 16-year-old boy could have written this book. Almost. So Jay's journal became a staple of the Satanic Panic canon, albeit lesser known than Michelle remembers, but the harm caused by this fever of stupidity that swept and continues to sweep the country is hard to overstate. But lest you think that the godly Sister Sparks repented her ways, I mean, other than that $75 check, she did not. She continued to, quote, find diaries, a fucking lot of them, including It Happened to Nancy by Anonymous Teenager. Almost Lost, the true story of an anonymous teenager's life on the streets. Annie's Baby, the diary of Anonymous, a pregnant teenager. Treacherous Love, the diary of an anonymous teenager. Kim, Empty Inside, the diary of an anonymous teenager. and Finding Katie, The Diary of Anonymous, a teenager in foster care.
I wonder if all of these teenagers had very similar writing voices.
Probably.
I wonder. No, that couldn't be, right?
Yeah. Well, another day, another blowjob, Dan.
Boy, Sister Beatrix needs to be careful because this addiction to lies and fake diaries could lead to marijuana.
No!
So upon Sister Sparks' death just 5 years ago, she was still earning royalties from both Go Ask Alice and Jay's Journal, and very likely many more of the anonymous journals that coincidentally happened to bolster her hyper-conservative, scolding, nonagenarian Mormon views about what happens when young people dare stray half an inch from what their parents and church demand of them. Funny that. Now, most of these, quote, diaries do have some fine print attached saying they are works of fiction for all the kids that read the publisher's page of their books. But then she still casts herself as the editor rather than the author, clearly wanting it both ways.
Right.
And this is hilarious. She also wrote and produced the pilot for a children's television show called, quote, The Calamity Kids. And if you guessed both words are spelled with a K, you guessed correctly.
I was going to ask that literally.
The Calamity Kids is a television phenomenon which IMDb generously describes as no results found for the Calamity Kids. YouTube did, however, find it, and I shall put this crime against horrible television in the show notes should you feel like hitting yourself in the head with a brick for some reason.
I'm just hoping that there is a moment where one puppet says to another, "Another day, another blowjob."
Well, it's set in a Utah County kindergarten, so it's probably going to say that. So, but for everyone else, I shall sum it up thusly. If you hate a focused camera, you'll love this window into a blurry time in Utah when every man, woman, and child had a bowl cut and everything looked entirely like shit. So that's the deeply unethical, fabulous Dr. Beatrice Sparks and her teen scaring and shaming books, Go Ask Alice and Jay's Journal. Oh, except that no one has ever been able to find any proof that she had a PhD, nor did she ever provide evidence of it. She may have been practicing psychiatric care without a degree or a license, which, I mean, that's super hard to believe from this woman, right?
Right. How could that even... No, it's not plausible.
Oh, and despite saying she was the editor of her books, copyright searches show she is the only person listed. So too bad, so sad for any of the troubled teens or their families hoping for some royalties from her exploitation of their stories, real or not. And critics believe Jay's Journal was the only one, quote, based on a real person.
Right.
But other than those trifling details, that's the story of the good doctor, maybe not Dr. Sparks, and her for sure totally real Go Ask Alice and Jay's Journal, and I Need a Silkwood Shower.
Yeah, right? Totally.
Yeah. And we talked about this. We've talked about it many times. We talked about it in the Satanic Panic episode, is that you know, like all conspiracies, you know, if you just take a minute and really think about, which I know I've just disqualified myself from any conspiracy theory, but, you know, like, okay, you're saying these teenagers, they killed a bull in a city, in a house, drained its blood into a bathtub.
They killed it elsewhere and then somehow got buckets of its blood home. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, then squeezed some urine out of the dinghy.
The dinghy.
Right, but I mean, all these satanic rituals involve dead bodies and dead animals.
Yeah,
it's like these are crime scenes.
Yeah.
Right. You just like you said, Mark, the quantity of people to believe that these things are true is basically every other person or everyone who's not you. But people are credulous.
Every time you get one of these reports about satanic rituals, it's not just a single incident. It happens like weekly or monthly or whatever. Yeah. And, you know, this is just one of 1,000 different cults just in Utah alone or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Where are all these missing people?
I know. When our own mother was wrapped up in this idea that there was a non-Mormon family in the neighborhood, this poor family, and that they had a human body in the house that they pushed children through to rebirth them into Satan, all the missing kids. I'm like, who's missing?
Yeah.
And nobody's missing from school. Nobody's missing from church. Who the fuck are these children?
Right. All right. Well,
but it's believable enough that Beatrix Sparks probably died a rich woman, unfortunately.
There you go.
She died. She should have been poorer for sure. So let's move on.